no days off or holidays, and you double on Christmas Day if that's what the training program has. And so it's nice you don't have to go check into an office, but at the same time, you you some days you just got to work out, even if it's Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever. So, but it's pretty cool to be able to run for a living.
You mentioned this in passing. You've had the experience of coaching yourself, training by yourself, and also training with the group. Who out here primarily runs with a friend or with a group when they're training? And similarly, who's primarily training alone? Seems like we got a fair mix. So for you, Dathan, maybe what were the pros and cons of both approaches when you train by yourself and now training with a group?
What? Everything okay back there?
They just really want to know the answer to the question.
Well, it's not that exciting. But training with people has huge advantages, but there's a lot of times to train alone as well. I think it's important, especially from not always from a motivation standpoint, but the quality workouts, the intervals, the tempo runs, even long runs, those are pretty important usually to have someone. They'll be there to help motivate you and to push you, but a lot of times on the easy days, it's okay to be by yourself, as long as you have the motivation to get out there. If you have the motivation to get out there, you can listen to your body and recover from session to session. And so sometimes it's good to be able to just turn the brain off and say, oh man, today I just don't have it. I don't have to keep up with Johnny or Susan, because someone is always going to feel different than you, and that was one of the problems I had in college, for example. As someone feels good every day, and so you got to be able to check the ego back, and some days you just don't. You got to listen to the body, and then on workouts, it's easier if you have someone there to push you. But there are important workouts too. Like if the coach says the goal of this workout is we don't go faster than this. If you run with someone else, the competitive juices start flowing. And so you have to be able to check the ego too and say, what is really, what do I really need here? And so they have pros and cons. And I think in general, if you can meet people for those workout days, you'll get a lot of benefit out of it. But don't be afraid to take that easy day by yourself either.
Nate, in your experience working with runners too, what do you feel about that whole dynamic training in groups versus training separately? Anything you've seen or you advise people that you're coaching?
I was sort of thinking about this. I was actually going to ask Dathan, what you found mentally more difficult, holding yourself back on those easy days, you always wanted to go faster, or was it hard mentally to grind it out hard on the track? Because runners and athletes are different, and as a coach, there's certain athletes where I kind of have to kick them in the ass a little bit, and it's you gotta go. You're very comfortable in this marathon gear, but as soon as you get to half marathon pace, the fire alarms start going off in the brain, so you're not used to that. Whereas others, it's the opposite. They want to go fast all the time, and they need to be held back.
Everybody's different, and that's okay and it's good, but. Yes, exactly. There are some people that respond well to someone telling them, lighting a fire under them. There's like me, I have to be held back. And that's why when I coached myself for those years, I struggled because like I said before, I was always thinking about things emotionally. I needed someone to say, hey, let's pull it back a little bit. But I have a really good friend, I'm not going to name him, and he was a great runner. Man, he was the opposite. And it was he needed someone there to just crack the whip always. And when the race came, he was tough as nails, but in practice, that's where he needed it. And so it's good to have someone to kind of have that give and take, relationship with as well. And so I think sometimes that can be a good training partner too, if you find someone that complements you. It's like having a partner, they say, opposites attract. And so it's kind of like that sometimes in training too. And so if you can find someone that you jive with good, that's important because, if you get in a training group of people that maybe, you're like, man, I don't like that person, you don't want that seeping into your brain either, and so you got to be able to get along well, but you got to be able to take and give, what each person's strengths and weaknesses are too. And so from a coaching standpoint, if you got a coach who knows, you know, maybe I should separate these people. It's maybe not a bad thing, you know, to have that too.
Yeah, they're gonna
It's a lot of
destroy each
egos.
other. Yeah.
So Dathan, for you, you talked a little bit about your history, you know, on the track, and you had a lot of accomplishments on the track, and then moved up in distance to the marathon. I think most people here are training for the marathon. Maybe show of hands, who here is signed up for the San Francisco Marathon?
Yeah, there we
All right,
go.
awesome. So really what I want to talk about, and Nate, with you as well, you'll have a lot of feedback here. As you're moving up in distance, you know, you've primarily been a 5K, 10K runner, and now you want to move up in distance. I know there's several components that have to be tweaked and have to be different. We can talk about each of them individually, but mentally, how did you approach that? Like, were there one or two key things that you're like, okay, I have to do this very differently now that I want to be a marathon runner?
Yeah, I think sometimes the marathon is very, very different from other races, but it's also, sometimes we think about it too much as being different that you forget that it's still a race, or it's still, you know, like, it's still running, and you're still, there's just a lot more variables. And so it's easy to, and so little things go really wrong in the marathon. That's one of the things. Whereas like if you go out too fast in a 5K or 10K, you might struggle at the end, but if you go out too fast in the marathon, I mean, hitting the wall, it's not the same as, you know, as it is in these other races where you were just maybe, you can kind of come back and you finish. It's a different world. And so there's a lot of variables that can go wrong. And so that's one of the exciting challenges too, is there's always something you can find to change. You get done with a marathon, you're like, oh, that was a horrible experience, I don't want to do that again, you know? But there's so many things you can always change, always you can get better at. So I've always found, you know, like with the marathon, you find these key things, and so identifying them, whatever it is, if you can only run so much volume, then, you know, that doesn't mean you can't run a marathon. It just means you have to change, you know, whatever, you have to adapt to it. And so like for me, you know, staying healthy is always hard to do. And so I've learned volume doesn't necessarily work for me anymore. It did when I was younger, because I could recover easier. But now, you know, like as you get more miles you run, you just have to focus on doing good at specific things. So the long run becomes very important. It becomes more specific in the marathon, and the workouts are important. They have to be big, but the easy runs, you know, you do enough to be able to do well on the quality sessions in the marathon. And so, but that's not necessarily true for someone who's just starting running, because when you're just starting running, the easy running is actually more important because you're not developed there as much as you are the more you've been running. So I was talking to you earlier, you said you just started running in the last year. You know, you're still getting a lot just from every time you go out the door. Whereas someone like me, who if I've been doing it for 20 years, running 100 miles a week, the 5 to 10 mile run doesn't really do a whole lot anymore. You know, like it's really the big sessions. So if you've been running a long time and you're running a marathon, the specific things, the long runs, the workouts, those become very important. But if you're just getting into running, and you're just starting, maybe this is your first marathon, just the basics make a big difference. And so you have to get good at the basics before you can get good at anything else. Once you get good at those, then you can start doing good at specific things.
Nate, how about anything you'd like to add to that on what you tell folks maybe attacking the marathon from the first time, moving up in distance?
I think what's interesting with the longer distances is, you know, to kind of piggyback on what Dathan was saying, the smaller potential mistakes are compounded over greater distances and also greater levels of training. And if I'm working with marathoners or triathletes, like look, like if you're getting ready for, I mean, how many of you guys are in a 16-week prep or a 20-week prep for the marathon? Like most of you guys? None of you guys are doing like a 2-week prep, right? You're out there for 4 or 5 months. I was making sure this thing's on. So 4 or 5 months is a really long time to not like twist your ankle in a pothole or catch a cold or be like held at work too late or something is gonna go wrong. you know, like your shoes don't work and you have to do something else. So there's all these decisions that we have to go to and make, and I feel like the more mature we are as runners and athletes, we can handle that stuff better. But the first time you go through, like, it is like the end of the world every single time. You're like, I got a blister. Can I run tomorrow? I don't know. Like, you look it up online, and just for everything, it's like that. So I think the challenge with the marathoner is not necessarily like giving it its respect and going after some of the shorter distances first. Like, you started at 26 for the marathon, is that
23.
right? 23, you did the
Yeah.
marathon. Did you have coaches telling you that was a bad idea?
I think they were telling me it was a good idea. I'm not sure it was, but nevertheless.
What's the consensus for like elite runners? Because it seems like a lot of them won't start the marathon until later in their career, and it's like you were doing a lot of higher, what most people would consider higher mileage stuff early on. Like, even when you're getting ready for 5K and 10K stuff and shorter, like, you were still in that 100-mile-a-week ballpark.
Yeah, but so it's changed now. In the professional running world, there's a lot of money in the marathon. And so people, especially like a lot of the East African runners, will run the marathon at 18 to 20 years old. So it sounds crazy. You would never see a high school kid, a really high level high school kid coming out and running a marathon, or, his first year or two in college. But, from an economic standpoint, they bypass the track. Sometimes these guys, if you see someone who wins a New York City Marathon or a Dubai Marathon or, some big marathon, sometimes you've never even heard of this guy. And he has no track PRs, no track credentials, whereas American guys, and, there's a development pattern. But you're talking about people who already have, quite a few years of high-level training under their belt. But they don't last very long either, because it takes a tremendous toll on the body right away. And so from a long-term approach, just like for you guys, starting at those shorter distances and building towards it is important, because you're building a foundation, just like I was saying before, you get good at the basics, and you can start to push the envelope a little bit more. If you go right to some big, huge goal, if you go right to climbing Mount Everest, having never done anything else, any other mountaineering, it's not a good idea, and same thing in running. And marathon is like that. It's a bigger goal. It's a harder goal. There's more that can go wrong. So get good at doing things first at a shorter distance. Doesn't mean you can't go out and run a marathon, but if you're going to really devote 16 or 20 weeks of training to it, it's a big chunk of your life. I mean, especially a lot of you guys have families and stuff, and you're out there, in the morning on a Saturday or Sunday morning doing a long run, and then you're toast the rest of the day, and the family wants to go and do things, and it becomes a commitment. And so, so taking it seriously is something that you want to ease your way into. You don't want to necessarily jump right into a huge training program that's such a commitment that then your family hates you for the next 3 months, and it takes over everything. So most people can do a marathon, but to really train hard for it and push the envelope, it takes a lot of commitment.
The other, certainly big change, I'm sure, that you went through as you started training more longer distances was the whole nutrition side of things. How did that evolve? And maybe, we can kind of separate it out to how you were looking at your day-to-day nutrition versus your performance nutrition and fueling for workouts. What were some of the big things that you found changed nutrition-wise as you moved up in distance?
Just like we were saying before, that little things make a big difference in the marathon, the same thing is true for nutrition, because the problem is a lot of people if you go from a half marathon or shorter distances, sure, if you're out there for a long time, it becomes an issue, but the training is a big issue. You're doing more training. Your recovery is harder and more important. The long runs are longer. And so if you're not fueling properly in the day-to-day training, the race and those 16 weeks, you might start good at the beginning, but by the end, you're running out of steam. You think, things the training doesn't progress. You always want your training to go like this as the race is coming. You want to be on the upswing still. You don't want to be like, oh man, I got a couple more weeks and the race is coming. You know, that's bad if that's happening. I mean, it's okay to get some little hiccup, but you know, like as long as you're still climbing, that's a good thing. And so nutrition, when I was younger, horrible. Like in college, I mean, you know, like cereal and meat, and there's no vegetables, there's no fruit, you know, like that was kind of it.
All the brown and white food groups.
Yeah, we had a wall of cereals that were all, you know, like you could choose.
What was
from.
your favorite?
Reese's peanut butter puffs.
Yeah.
You know, and we had, and you would do that, and then you buy whatever cheap meat you could find at the store, you put it on the grill, and that was it.
The morning of like the cross country collegiate national championships, what type of cereal did you eat?
Actually, I don't know what I had then because of that we were on the road, but I bet it was actually better than what I was eating in my day-to-day training. But you know, you don't think about that when you're young. And a lot of times, that's the one thing about the marathon training is that you think I'm running more so I can eat whatever I want. And that's kind of what there's this old saying, well, if the furnace is hot enough, it'll burn anything. Well, the chimney will also start on fire, and if you know, like, so that doesn't mean you can eat anything you want.
So, like, what was the like advice you were given from your coaches at the time? Did they talk about that at all? Like, were they like telling you guys to, you know, eat better, and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, well, my coach in college was saying that I had some injuries, and he was saying you got to go to Whole Foods, and you got to get these things. I was like, well, I'm in college. I don't have money to go to Whole Foods. And so, you know, you got to cook your steak in a cast iron skillet and, you know, put your vegetables in there. You know, like that was his, you know, philosophy, which was great. But at the same time, this is just a snippet of information. And so, you know, it's like a lifestyle of learning to eat healthy. And so in training, same thing. It's easy to get in a bad habit. And so if you are addicted to sugar, you know, because you're like, man, I'm training hard and it feels great, I can put it in right away. Yes, you can, but then the next day when you're not training as hard, it's there, you want it again, you know, and then it becomes a problem. And you're not burning what's a good, efficient fuel. And it's okay to eat stuff like that on occasion, but it becomes a habit. And it becomes hard to break a habit then like that. And then you're not. So when Sunday comes around, it's, you know, in the long runs there, all of a sudden it's not the same as being able to do it on an easy day.
How do you know you're addicted to sugar? Asking for a friend.
Sugar is a really hard addiction to break, actually. It's like, you know, it's like there's chemicals in your brain that are telling you to go for it, especially if you're running a lot, because it is a natural response. I mean, your blood sugar, you start utilizing all the glycogen in your body, and it's like human instinct to go for that. And it's like all of us. You want the quick fix, and that's exactly what it is. And so it's not that it's bad to have, if you're training at a super high intensity level, like for me, if I go to the track and I'm doing intervals and it's a long day, yeah, it doesn't matter. I got to have something that gets in me quick. But from a training on a daily standpoint, you know, like if you have something like that and you're not burning it at that super high level, it becomes negative. I mean, eventually, you know, you're not getting the same recovery, the same response. And so I've changed my just day-to-day nutrition over the course of my career. A lot more emphasis now on if the days are easy, think of like the days are easy, the fuel is kind of low and steady. Like a higher fat diet, less things that create a big insulin response. So like the bars and stuff like that. It's like a normal thing for me to have when I get up from that 2-hour nap. It's part of my training day. I have a cup of coffee and I have a UCAN bar, and that's like the bridge for me between what I fuel with after, you know, like my big session. I have my bigger meal, you know, like get a lot of fuel back in me. Well, it's still 5 or 6 hours at least between my next session. And so it's something that bridges that gap without creating a huge spike in insulin in the middle of the day.
But on the track days, the peanut butter Cocoa Puffs come back into the mix.
They have not reappeared in my daily life anymore. Unfortunately, I would love to have those back, but
So we need to. You like that peanut butter bar? You can peanut butter pop.
if you guys can bridge, into with a company that creates
Kellogg's.
that, Kellogg's, and they make that in cereal. If there's a UCAN cereal coming out, then I'll eat it.
So one thing, Dathan, like as an elite athlete, you actually had the opportunity with some of the stuff you're talking about in terms of the sugar and the metabolic response it creates to actually get some testing and kind of put some data behind what you were suspecting or what you were kind of describing. And I know at that point was kind of around the time you also started training with UCAN, I think prior to the Boston Marathon in 2015. Can you kind of just speak to a little bit of what you were feeling and even just for those of us that don't have the opportunity to like take a metabolic test, maybe in layman's terms, understand why you would want to get that type of information?
Yeah, and this is where it becomes, you can't always, I'm lucky on the course I get to pick my drinks. I get to have my own bottles every 5K that I can put, like you guys have to take what's out on the course. Sorry. That's the way it is. But the way you can use the UCAN, and this is kind of how I started in 2015, is trying to change my metabolic efficiency because the marathon is a long event, and so this is why it's a little different. You become more dependent over the course of longer, less intense exercise on fatty acid metabolism, which is in your body you have almost an relatively unlimited source of that. At a high intensity level, if you're doing intervals, you're going to go straight to burning glycogen and sugar, basically blood sugar that's in your, right away. But if you're out there for 3-4 hours in a marathon, you're going to become pretty heavily dependent on those fatty acids that are in your body. So in 2015, I wanted to do the same thing. So in my long sessions, in my training, non-intense short things, but longer workouts, I started drinking the Superstarch because it allowed me to continue to, because if I was out there for 20 miles, it's still, you're burning 2,000 calories while you're out there, if I'm running at 5:30 or 5:45 a mile. But I still didn't want to have this huge shoot of insulin in my system every time I'd take a drink. And so I started drinking that on that stuff, trying to just become more efficient at that. And then same thing when I'd finish, I didn't want to go straight into having some super sugary recovery drink, so I'd have the recovery right afterwards at the UCAN. And it would allow me to refuel without making my pancreas kick out insulin like crazy, basically. And so you save the short days for the short stuff, and then your day-to-day, 80% of the time, though, you don't want that. So you want these big kicks. Maybe it's 2 days a week where you do short fastings, and the rest of your training is long or easy. You want to maximize those days, and so you have different nutrition needs, and that's kind of what I did in 2015.
And for those of you guys, just to piggyback off what Dathan was saying, so for you guys who aren't familiar with the UCAN product, the carbohydrate in UCAN, it's a starch rather than sugar or maltodextrin, something you see in most of your sports nutrition products. So that's really what he's alluding to. It's the type of carbohydrate that, based on the fact that it's breaking down a lot slower, is creating a different metabolic effect. And so that's what, as you guys have the opportunity to try UCAN in your training, you'll hear a lot of us talking about the importance of the pre-run fueling, because that's really the key with UCAN. It's not the traditional thing that you're taking every 20 minutes, every 30 minutes that, like Dathan was alluding to, is giving you that quick burst. It's something you're actually preloading with, and it's keeping you steady and sustained for those long efforts. And Nate, I know you've had a chance to play around with it too. What's been your experience?
Well, I think what's interesting in addition to like fueling in a way that causes your insulin levels to go up and down, if you're out there for a long time, like it can create this massive load just on your gut. Like your small intestines need blood to basically digest and process all that. So longer runs and races, I'm just trying to think back to my Ironman days when I used to race there. Like, the longer we're out there and the hotter it is, like, blood is shunted away from our stomach and small intestine and out into our periphery, just to our limbs, just to keep our muscles going and also to help cool us down. So the hotter it is and the harder you're working, the more difficult it is to process anything. And I think we've all had an experience where we've been out there and we ate something and we're like, ooh, that did not go well. So the benefit, I think, of this, when I don't have to consume things as often, I take some of that stress off the gut and small intestine away. But, more specifically for me, I was racing the North Face 50K last fall, and I was getting out on my feet for the 3 to 4 hour runs, and then also just like, I'm a coach, so there are times where I'm like, I don't really want to eat breakfast at 4:15 in the morning when I wake up, so a lot of times I won't eat until like 8:30 or 9, and I found myself being able to grab like a UCAN bar like 2 hours in, and then I could be able to go for a run with some of my buddies, keep up with them, and then I'd have breakfast later. So I found it was like kind of a good pseudo meal replacement in the morning. I don't know if you guys have like kale and stuff in there.
Kale flavored bar.
Probably not, but it was, I found that to be very, very helpful. And then just in the long runs, yeah, it's great. It's just super steady.
Awesome. So if you guys definitely make sure to grab samples when we're done with this. We've got sample bags, and you can certainly pick Dathan's brain or any of our brains more specifically on UCAN. I wanted to open it up to questions in the chance that we have here. And Dathan, I had one, maybe I had one more for you, Nate. You have one, and we can give people in the audience a chance to think of theirs. So, we've talked about kind of how the training changed a little bit, the nutrition side of things. What about some other little things that people are always thinking about? I know sleep is something, for example, that's talked a lot about these days. Do you have kind of a specific way you approach how much sleep you want to get? You've talked about taking naps. How does sleep factor into your training?
Sleep is the number one thing. UCAN might be number 2. But sleep is the number one thing that you can do to make yourself ready for the next day's training. Because all of the changes that happen in your body, it's like that stuff, all the training you do is absorbed in your sleep. Your sleep kicks out all kinds of growth hormones and things like that. If you sleep bad, if you only sleep 4 hours a day or you don't sleep deep, you'll never see the changes in your training, and you just will never you'll never continue to rise like that. You'll get hurt more often. I notice it. I get hurt more often if I don't prioritize that sleep. It doesn't have to be the 2-hour nap in the afternoon like I had, but I do think you could tell your boss that there's scientific evidence that a 20-minute siesta after lunch is good for you, because it is. But if you can go to bed and get good deep sleep, it's just going to make your training so much better. And so, that's another thing though. I'm going to give a plug here again. If you eat something right before bed, because a lot of us are like that, where you want some kind of snack. I have to have some kind of snack before bed. Like, I have to. And especially when I'm training a lot.
What's your snack?
I have the sweet tooth. It's the problem, And so.
What's your favorite thing? Are we
favorite?
like ice cream? Are we chocolate? Is it dark?
I like dark chocolate. That's like my favorite thing. And so, but if you eat a whole bunch of stuff like that right before bed, it's bad news. I'm telling you.
Absolutely. So we can't take the plug away if you said you're going to give a plug. So you've been
peanut butter butter chocolate one. They're actually really good. It's really good if you like peanut butter and chocolate.
And while you're on that, you got another secret with that bar that you do.
This is a secret, I'd say, only to these panels. So a lot of people love a smoothie afterwards, right? And you do that as a recovery smoothie. I'm telling you, this is a base for a smoothie. One of these things, you drop this in the smoothie and so you put a scoop of peanut butter and a banana and some Greek yogurt with one of these in there. It's like the best. It actually gives it a really good, consistent, chocolatey, smooth flavor.
It's awesome. I've never heard of putting a bar in a smoothie.
You drop
until
that thing
Dathan,
right,
so.
break it up and drop it right in the blender, and it's great. It's a great emulsifier.
So was that like a necessity one day when you ran out of powder and you're like, crap, I need to use a bar, some experiment? What made you come to that realization?
Completely by accident, because I was like, oh man, it was a hot day in the summer. This was a few years ago, and I was just craving that like peanut butter smoothie, and I was like, man, I don't have anything in the house. You know, there's nothing in here, and I have a whole bunch of these in the pantry. You know, that is one good thing about being sponsored by them. I get lots of Yukon product, and so I broke that thing up and put it in there, and I was like, dude, this is actually really good. I mean, so yeah, it was a complete accident.
We're gonna get you doing that on video, so stay tuned for that. Nate, how about you? Any questions for Dathan? Then we'll open it up to the audience.
So when I was, doing a little YouTube stalking, because we're gonna do some filming later, and I just wanted to get a sense of, just different things you put out there, and just getting a little bit more of your background, and what was just really, I just remember seeing this photo of you. I think it was in 2004. You're on the track, and you're like, he is so young. And the Olympics is incredible, and now here you are, at the Olympics. Hey, I'm right there with you. I got a feeling silver is coming through. But what does it mean to be going for the Olympics into 2020, and maybe how does that kind of compare to back in, I guess, 2004 when you went?
It means a lot of pain, but I love running, I love racing, I love the feeling of being out there, and I love running. It just has, it's addictive, and I'm still addicted. I can't break the addiction, and so in 2004, I limped my way onto that team because, American distance running is really good now. Like, we're one of the best countries in the world, but, back how long ago? 14 years ago, we actually, it was like pretty crappy. And we actually didn't even have a full team of people to send because you had to qualify based on times. And I was like one of the only guys with the time. So I was hurt. I just had to finish the race at the Olympic trials and I would be on the team basically. So I limped my way onto the team, and I remember thinking, I'm 21. I don't know if I'll ever make another Olympic team. I was fortunate to go on and make a couple more and, be able to keep running all these years and do this. But so it means something different to me now. I guess it doesn't really, I don't need to prove anything anymore. I mean, like, I've broken American records and made Olympic teams and ran, all these things, but it's just me. I just can't break the addiction, I guess, I just love running. I love racing. And so it's harder now than it used to be, but it's still fun. And so I guess it's better than sitting in an office somewhere crunching numbers. I always have to remind myself. So, even when it's hard, like I had to pull out of the Boston Marathon a couple weeks ago with an injury, and that's like devastating at the moment. But I'm like, it's better than having to do something I don't love to do either. And so, the grass isn't always greener when you think about, man, is this really worth it? At the end of the day, it usually is.
Maybe while we're on that, Dathan, can you speak to that? I know, like, for folks out here too, having put everything into training for a race and then making that tough decision, this is what's good for my body, this is what's good for me long term. How did you deal with that emotionally, and like, what can you say, just having gone through that, to anyone else that has to deal with something like that?
At the end of the day, that's always the most important thing, because it's so hard to take that emotion out, and say, I put in 4 months here, and something, but you usually know in the back of your head, this isn't good. This isn't going to be good, and how's it going to look the next 2 months? And I always have to think about that, and I think that's something that as runners, we always think, yeah, it'll probably get better, but if it's not getting better, and we're going to continue doing, and keep doing what we're doing running, if it's getting worse and it's not getting better, it probably means it's time to take a bigger look at it. And is this worth, in 2 weeks, slogging through this? Am I going to be out for 2 months? It's probably not worth it at that point. Even though you put in 4 months, it's going to be two crappy months after that. And I've made the decision a lot of times that wasn't good because, you know, financially, like, you know, like there's financial things and stuff like that. But if I was to think about just my general health and, you know, like that, you can usually make your mind up pretty quick. If this is going to affect me a couple months down the road, then it's probably time to take a deeper look at it. And so running is great. And like I said, a lot of times here it's addictive. And sometimes addictions are not always good. Like, and so being able to, that's another reason why having a coach is good. And having a supportive family or friends, because you can at least say to them, and they can maybe tell you. You got to have people that can tell you things you don't want to hear, because as a runner, you tend to be so emotional that sometimes you miss the ball, even though you know. And in your heart of hearts, after you make the decision, you know, I should have done that. But you can't make that decision sometimes. And so having people, coaches, family, friends that can tell you, you know, I think that's a good thing.
Anybody in the audience? Any questions for either Dathan or Nate? Go ahead.
So after the weather for the Boston Marathon, were you happy then?
No, I still wish that I had, you know, I mean, yeah, that's the thing about running, you know, like you still, you know, I still wish I was there, but hey, you know, life goes on, and you move to the next thing, and now that it's getting further in the rearview mirror, it gets easier every day.
Tomorrow when I see you, we're not saying the word Boston. So this is the last day. You sir, go ahead.
Does your dad still run? And what do you have older brothers and sisters that helped you fall in love with it? Or
he does not run anymore. He had an accident where he can't run anymore, basically. But my siblings were not runners either. I don't come from a family of runners, really. My dad didn't start running until he was 40, you know, and so but now my kids, all they know is running, because my wife was a good runner. My wife was an All-American runner at Colorado, and so my kids don't know any different. My kids are 7 and 10, and they just think it's normal to go to the track and do intervals, you know, and so it's not normal.
Amazing.
Go ahead.
So my average cadence, everybody's different. You know, there's a lot of talk about what should be ideal. You know, a lot of people say your average cadence is like 180 strides per minute is ideal. Well, I happen to be about 180 strides a minute, but you know, like I have a couple of people I coach, and we've tried to slowly make them a little bit quicker. But I have a girl I coach that's well over 200. She's like it looks, and so everybody's a little different. And so big changes are dangerous sometimes to make. Little changes can happen, and they can happen over time. But I went through a pretty big form change myself at one point, and sometimes you have to have a plan, and you have to have you know, guidance, know what you're doing, and it has to usually take a long time.
I think it's important to like remember like where that number came from was actually through observation, and I can't remember the name of the original kind of scientist guy who was looking at this, but he was actually looking at like competitive runners in I think the 1984 Olympics, something like that, and he basically was counting everyone, and he's like, a lot of these guys are at this level, this must be the number. And to me what's interesting is like when we sort of see like athletes go towards a higher cadence, it's a natural adaptation. It's literally adapt or die in a competitive mindset, because if you're on a track and someone accelerates, like you're not going to muscularly start bounding after them. Like you're going to have to start turning over a little bit faster to accelerate change. So I've always felt like from the competitive athlete side, they've done it just out of necessity. Like competition has sort of driven that to a certain degree. And what's interesting for a lot of adult runners now who are just getting into running, they haven't really done anything for 20 years. Well, how quickly do you ramp them up into that?
Yeah, and like everybody is different too, and so it's the same thing with like strides per minute, but also like, you know, there's a lot of talk about form and technique and forefoot. You know, everybody's different, and if you look at people, you look down the road, everybody has a unique style. A lot of it is just adaptation from their life and their body style. Some people are really tall and have super long legs. Some people are really short. Some people have wide hips. You know, like so those things are usually reasons for them, and you might be able to have a strength coach or someone that adapts you to being able to change those things, but you can't just consciously say, I'm going to try to run like Dathan. I mean, you can try, but it's not going to, first of all, you might get hurt. Secondly, it's not going to feel easy for you because it's actually physically takes concentration, and your body is not, that's not the most efficient thing for it in the state that it's in. Now, you might be able to slowly get there by changing things, but yeah, be happy with what you have, and then try to get better from there, but don't try to be something that you're not ready to do either.
Do you have any favorite types of cross training or strength work outside of running? I noticed for myself, I'm 35 too, and I just incorporate things over the years that really help with mobility.
Yeah, so for me, I've changed over the years as I've gotten older. I take a day off of running every week now. I cross-train during that day. My go-to for me is the bike. I like the bike. I have a bike on a trainer, stationary trainer, and so even when I'm hurt, especially, I'll use that as well. And so I like to keep in a couple days a week where I do the bike instead of where I would have done an easy run before, because then if I do get hurt and say I got to spend a week cross training, it's not like some big thing, like if you haven't been biking and then you go all of a sudden you're like, man, you strain something in like your calf and that's all you can do. And then you go, after 3 days on the bike, you're like, oh, dude, I can't move. Like, my quads are sore, like, I can't even sit down on the seat, like, all that stuff. Well, if you're doing just a little bit, it's easy to go into doing that out of this when you need to. And so that's kind of my go-to just because I'm comfortable with it. And so whatever you're comfortable with, obviously, from a strength training standpoint, that's another thing. Like, I don't like to take the day off completely. So even if I don't do a workout or on the bike on that day off, I like to go to the gym because I just have to move. And so I spend a couple days a week with devoted strength training, but just, getting things firing, getting some length through the muscles, that kind of stuff makes me not feel like garbage the day afterwards either.
Yeah.
And yeah.
How many sessions of strength you do? Is it and does it change depending on where you are in proximity to race? Are you like 1 day, 2 days, 3 days a week?
Yeah, it completely changes based on the training. So for me in the marathon, usually it's just like running. I'll have a general strength base type training, which is usually for me, I like to do it. I really like to do it. It depends on how much I'm training, but sometimes I like to do it the day before, just simply because if it's a light session, I feel like it helps get things going, keeps things firing. But if I'm training, sometimes it's easy for me to actually, believe it or not, it's easy for me to gain mass, and so I will do it sometimes after a hard, if I do a hard workout, the afternoon I'll come back and do my lift in the afternoon when I'm in a catabolic state where my body's trying to, repair all the damage I did from the workout. You'll never gain, if you do that, you will never gain muscle mass if you do that. That's the reason why, you don't ever see, bodybuilders and things like that doing tons of, aerobic work, because it will just it won't let your body gain mass. And so, but a lot of times, the day before a race, I'll do something, I'll go to the gym, 10 to 15 minutes. It's short and explosive dynamic things, not a whole lot of volume, and a decent amount of weight on things.
Could you give an example,
Yeah,
exercises?
So something that I would do the day before a race would be something like med ball tossing, basically for height. So you have to kind of know what you're doing a little bit, obviously. There's some simple hinge techniques and stuff like that that are foundations. But if you do think of doing a deadlift, if you were to do that with a 20-pound ball and throw it as high as you can, it's just quick, quick, quick. It's the same thing as doing strides. It just fires your nervous system and gets things snapping like that. So it might be 5 to 10 minutes of, like there's some, just things to engage things, and then just literally it's like strides in the weight room, basically. Med ball slams, maybe med ball tosses for height, things like that. Not long things, not a lot of reps, just a couple of short things sometimes with a lot of weight. And then, like taking like a deadlift straight, you're coming straight off the floor with heavy weight and then dropping it. That's it. And that you might do 4 or 5 of those. And then but that kind of stuff, you kind of need to have a foundation and know what you're doing first. But it can go a long ways, and sometimes it's less risky. Like a lot of people, I used to do a lot of short hill sprints as a form of building strength and power. But it's risky because of the explosive nature of it. I felt like I can get a lot of the same gains in the weight room without as much risk.
Yeah, interesting. I think for runners, they don't always have, they don't know where to go for strength training or
the run experience is a great place.
Well, so I'm really asking, for you, obviously elite runners have different resources, and where did you feel like you had good resources naturally on the strength mobility side? Did you feel like, man, my coaches are giving me some stuff, but I got to go find this on my own? How did you develop that?
It was not easy because I had initial strength coaches that were they knew nothing about running. And so running is specific, and so, the football coaches in high school, they don't know, I'm not doing bench pressing, that's the last thing you want to do is develop the upper side of your body so you're laying more weight on your chest, and so it happened out of necessity to get healthier from injuries. I was fortunate to start working with people, therapists afterwards that knew running, specific things. So I was really fortunate, and then I just started to develop my own knowledge base. But it took years of doing that and multiple coaches of learning what they did and then making it practical for my own training, because then they knew, this. So I've had for the last, about almost 10 years, I've had a separate strength coach from my running coach. The only problem comes when they're not on the same page of where you're running, because it should always complement your running. And so if you're doing more strength work that makes you not get better as a runner, then it doesn't matter what you're doing. And so there either has to be a connection to your running coach, so where they can communicate. The running coach is in charge. This is where we're going. Strength coach says, okay, how do we help you get there? Yeah. And so that is important to have. And so if you could communicate, with your running coach or your strength coach that this is the training program, then they can say, this is what you should do.
That's cool.
Go ahead.
You had mentioned how important sleep is. Is there anything different that you do to ensure that you get better sleep aside from your 2-hour siesta?
Yeah, so sleeping I'm not a great sleeper naturally, I guess. And so if I'm one of those people that if I wasn't training, I could probably get by in 5 hours of sleep, and function okay. My wife, she doesn't really train anymore. If she doesn't get 9 hours of sleep, man, it's a bad day for me the next day. And so, you have to, it's individual, but generally I found, for myself, I love coffee, but I can't have coffee past 3 o'clock. If I do that, I'll be up till midnight, and so I know that with my kids, same thing. My kids, sorry guys, you got to go to bed by 9 o'clock because I need an hour to, otherwise I'll be up. And so I try to be lights out at 10, for me. So, sorry kids, you're going to bed at 9 o'clock. And now they're old enough that they can, they'll go to bed when I tell them to, and I don't have to be watching them, but yeah, for me, I always have to unwind beforehand. I found that I sleep better and easier if I spend 15 minutes doing some rolling and rolling and scraping and stuff like that before bed. I have my tools, runners have all their little therapy tools, but if you spend that 10 to 15 minutes doing light stuff like that, helps you get you into a state of that, and then bringing your body temperature down before you go to bed is important. And so like your body will want to sleep. As your core temperature comes down, you climb under those covers and it's nice and warm and you're a little chilly, and then you go right to sleep.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, I think that's where we're all at. Well, Dathan, I will ask one more, and then just want you folks to know. Oh, yeah, go ahead. I got one more for you, but go ahead.
Oh, okay.
No,
Cool.
sorry.
Just a question on, so the 2012, when you did the 10,000 meter for the Olympics, so I know you did the marathon trials, and then you trained for the 10,000, made the Olympic team, and then set a marathon PR. So I just have, what do you think on someone who's doing marathon for a long time, stepping down, focusing on a smaller distance like that,
Yep.
in order to get, faster again, because maybe they've been doing it a while?
Yeah, so my marathon PR I set in 2012 in Chicago. I ran 2:07:47. Well, that was like only 9 weeks after the Olympics in the 10K. And so I am a huge advocate of coming back after a marathon, spend time going back to speed, because it's so easy to lose power and efficiency because you just get used to it, and everybody's different. A lot of people, if you run marathons, generally you like longer training. People don't just do it but most people like the longer stuff. I hate doing fast, short stuff. So, I have to force myself to do it, but it's good to set a goal afterwards and come back, build a little bit of speed and power, because it's just easy to get away from it. And the further you get away from it, the harder it is to go back. And so if you make a habit out of it, and sometimes it's not great, you just have to be able to check the pride a little bit. You're like, well, that wasn't nearly as good as it was a couple years ago when I was doing all short stuff. But it gives you that base speed to come back in. It's so much easier to go back to do like a tempo runs after doing short, fast stuff. It's like it just feels so much easier than if you're just doing tempo stuff all the time. And that's what we do in the marathon. A lot of times it's just longer, slower stuff. You get in a comfort zone. You go back to getting out of your comfort zone is super important. And so that's I think it's important to always come back after something long like that. Come back to the speed.
I think we had one more behind you. Yeah, go ahead.
So you talked about your workouts and your nutrition, and I'm wondering if you do anything else that is more in terms of self-care that helps you take care of yourself.
Yeah, so self-care, like I was saying before, that 15 minutes of rolling and stuff like that before bed. I actually do that before every run. I spend 15 minutes rolling and stuff. I have to do a whole cool down of dynamic. It's like stepping down. And so I do my rolling and some activation exercises, some hip exercises before I run. Then I do my run, my workout, whatever. And then my cool down, it looks like easy jogging, then dynamic stretching, which is movement. It's not, and then some light static stuff. So that's actually dynamic. Then some active isolated things. Then static stretching. Then rolling. So I'm going like this and bringing everything slowly down. And so it ends up. And how I said before, I will spend 6 hours a day just on a normal day. That's because all of a sudden you're looking at 2 hours worth of self. Now I have the time. What else do I have to do? There's no excuse, So, but if you can just spend, 10 to 15 minutes and just make it part of your routine, and that's the biggest thing. You have to do these things. Yeah. You get done running, you have to do this. It's part of the day. And so, take a mile of your running out and spend 5 to 10 minutes instead doing these things. If that's all the time you have. That will make gains long term more than that one extra mile, and then you're like, oh, I gotta go and I shower right away, run to work and grab, and eat something in the car. That 5 to 10 minutes, it becomes a habit, and habits are important. Good habits and bad habits are not important.
Do you find yourself is that kind of the regular thing that elite runners at your level do? And did you do that back in 2004, 2008, or do other runners look at you and you're like, you're crazy, man?
This is adapted over time, and that's one of the reasons. All my contemporaries are basically retired for a long time. I'm 35, and I've had 20 stress fractures and 3 surgeries and all these things, but I'm still going because it's part of, I learned this from Ned. Ned, you couldn't talk to him for 20 or 30 minutes after he was running because he had his routine, and it was like, I get done, I take my shake, I do my dynamic stretches, I do my static stretches, I do my isolated active stretches, and I do my exercises. And he ran until he was 42, at a high level, and it was strictly because he was, crazy in that way, but it's a good crazy. You have to, and it just becomes part of your ritual and part of your habit. I didn't have that before. Before it was like, when I was younger, you kill it in the workouts, that's the fun part, and then you're done and you just go. And I would go golf every Wednesday. Me and my friends, we'd have our medium distance run, and then we'd go golf. I haven't golfed in 10 years now because of that. I've become more professional, and you don't have to spend 6 hours a day like me, but they become just these little habits, and then it doesn't really interfere with your life because it's just what you do, and you don't dread it, and a lot of times professional runners, they start to lose the desire to do all those little things before they just lose the desire to actually run and race and train. But to me, it's just normal,
Well, with that, guys, we'll wrap this portion up, but Dathan's gonna hang around for a little bit. He'll be up here if you guys wanna. We have photos of Dathan that he can sign for you if you guys wanna take a picture. If you have any final questions to ask him, you can feel free to do that. And also, if you guys do want to try the UCAN, we've got taste samples. We've got sample bags up there as well. Make sure to grab that. But I really want to thank Dathan. I want to thank all you guys. Really great questions. Thank Nate for being up here too. We're really looking forward to doing a lot of stuff with Run 365 with the San Francisco Marathon. So we can expect a lot of these.
Vern, I'm kind of hungry. Can I eat this?
Absolutely, Nate. Absolutely.
This one's mine.
Thank you guys. Thanks everyone.
Awesome. Cool. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in to our live stream. Dathan right here. We are going to take a little break, and we are going to film a bunch of cool videos.
Sounds like fun to me.
I know. So these will be up on our channel over the next couple weeks and months. And yeah, let's go get a little UCAN snack. See you guys.
Basically, that's the go-to.